ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ ಅಲ್ಲ. Only 83 students have come.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, in the end, you give me the screenshot of these attendance.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Okay, ma'am.
Okay, now who is the
Keen, ma'am.
Okay.
Ma'am, can we start?
Yeah, you can start. You first, all students have logged in, no? So you can start with your introduction, and later on your group members will be taking this one like as per your topic.
Sure, ma'am.
Okay, students, today it is the presentation with respect to social harmony and national integration. So you all can be attentive during this presentation. Yeah, you can start. Which group you are? You have not mentioned your group number.
Group 5, ma'am.
You should mention no on this PPT. Okay, you can mention and then submit. Okay.
Sure, ma'am.
Okay. So you are from group 5.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. You can start.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is King Victor, and I'm from Group 5 of Section A, presenting the NSS presentation of social harmony and national integration. Our group members are Ashik Khanal, Abhigna, Ahadal Niyas, Akshat Patel, Anaga, Ananya, Ankita Verma, Ayas, King Victor, Devendra, Gopal, Indraneil Reddy. So, what is social harmony? Social harmony is defined as a process of valuing, expressing, respecting, promoting love, trust, admiration, and equity upon other people in any particular society, regardless of their national origin, weight, material status, ethnicity, color, gender, race, age, and occupation. It's basically, it does not matter who you are and what you are, just trust and love. So, what is national integration? National integration is the bond and togetherness between people, regardless of their caste, creed, religion, or gender. It's the feeling of oneness, brotherhood, and social unity under communities and societies in a country. National integration helps to keep the country unified and strong from within, despite the diversities, and will always progress on tracks of development and prosperity. So, the basic question is, what are the aims of these social harmony and national integration? It's basically the global harmony. These provide us a better environment for the people of a country. Thus, they can develop themselves in all the aspects. It also aids to bind multiracial and multilingual countries like ours together. National integration also helps in keeping the stability of a country and adds up to its whole development. It supports to nurture communal harmony and fight casteism, religionism, and linguism, etc. It unites the people in case of any national emergencies as of now. So, going to my main topic, history of India. This is the timeline of our country through time. Our country begins its civilization in the Indus Valley at around 2600 to 1900 BC, where the mature Indus Valley civilization flourished. There was a peak population of 5 million, and after that, people from Indus Valley have started migrating towards Ganga Yamuna basins. Then, one of the major periods of Indian history, known as Vedic period, has begun, which led to the foundations of Indian civilization itself, and it emerged. And there was the emergence of an early Hinduism as the foundational religion of India, and the social and religious phenomena known as caste was also introduced. And then Mauryan Empire, which was considered as the largest empire in India with around 5 million square kilometers covering. And one of the considered greatest emperor of India, Ashoka, was from this time, and they established international trade routes. And then a beloved Vijayanagara Empire has started along the banks of Tungabhadra River. And Vijayanagara was the world's second largest city during its time. And Hampi as one of the cities has many Hindu monuments which we all love and praise till today. And then Mughal Empire started with around 4 million square kilometers, making it the second largest empire in India, and which also had many World Heritage masterpieces like Taj Mahal. And one of the king of Mughal Empire, Akbar, who increased European trades and made India a strong and stable economy, which led to European explorations. And in 1498, Vasco da Gama successfully made a sea route to India from Europe, which led to establishments of ports. And internal conflicts among Indian kingdoms gave opportunities to European traders to gradually establish political influence and appoint lands. And these European traders have started a company of merchants of London trading into East Indies, which is also known as East India Company, in 1600s. And it started expanding its reign in India. And people didn't like it and they started revolting, which has led to beginning of a great revolution we all love and praise as freedom struggle. And now my teammate Ananya would take over.
Good afternoon to all. Myself Ananya. Hello. Good afternoon to all.
Yes,
Myself
Ananya. Yeah, Ananya,
Yes,
you
ma'am.
can continue. Very good presentation by first, what's his name? Veer.
Keen Victor.
Keen, ma'am.
Okay. So you gave very good introduction. So now Ananya is continuing. Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon to all. I'm here to present a few events during the Indian freedom struggle. By the end of the 18th century, the British East India Company was no longer a trading company. It had succeeded in bringing India under its political control. Between the Battle of Plassey and the revolt of 1857, there were a large number of small-scale revolts all over the country. But these revolts was not big enough to challenge the British power. The oppressive and exploitative methods of the Britishers fueled to form the first war of Indian independence. After the revolt, the British East India Company was abolished and India was passed directly under the British crown. The change in governance, it was felt that much would change for the better in British India. However, the attitude of the Britishers remained unchanged, and this was evident from the bills and acts passed by them, one of them being the Ilbert Bill passed in 1883. The bill stated that Indian judges, if competent enough, could try Europeans accused of crimes. The whites reacted violently and the bill was shelved. This proved to the Indians that they had to fight for their rights. A prerequisite for this was an organized political body which could protect the interests of the Indians. Thus, under the leadership of A.O. Hugh and Surendranath Banerjee, a purely Indian political party was set up, as we know, the Indian National Congress. Later, other organizations were formed, like the Muslim League in 1906 by Syed Ahmad Khan and Swaraj Party in 1923 under the leadership of C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru. Sensing that the nationalistic feeling of Indians would prove a threat to the British authority, they tried to drive a wedge between the Hindus and Muslims of the country. The partition of Bengal in 1906 by Lord Curzon and the Minto Morley reforms, which gave separate electorates for Hindus and Muslims, was all part of this goal. These British tactics proved to be futile after the signing of the Lucknow Pact in 1916 and the formation of the Home Rule movement by Annie Besant and Bal Gangadhar Tilak. By the year 1915, Gandhiji had returned to India. It was he who led the regional movements to create a mass base for the national movement. Gandhiji's first step with Satyagraha was at Champaran in Bihar, where he took up the cause of the indigo cultivators against the planters. He launched a movement and forced the government to raise the price of indigo. After his success in Champaran, his methods was adopted by all people of India. Gandhiji launched the non-cooperation movement after the Jallianwala Bagh tragedy and the introduction of the Rowlatt Act. The Khilafat movement by Ali brothers was also launched during this period. The movement was called off when it was at its peak after the Chauri Chaura incident, killing 22 policemen. In 1930, the civil disobedience movement began, boycotting the Simon Commission as it was an all-white commission and adoption of the Purna Swaraj resolution at the Lahore session of Congress. Gandhiji undertook his historic Dandi March from Sabarmati Ashram in 1930 to curb the British monopoly over salt. After salt satyagraha, people began to manufacture and sell salt openly. The civil disobedience movement was called off after the Gandhi-Irwin Pact of 1931. Dissatisfied with the Round Table Conference and the Cripps Mission, the Quit India movement was launched in 1942. By this time, the demand for complete independence began stronger. Even before the movement could begin, all the leaders, including Gandhiji, were arrested, and the International Congress was banned. British realized that it was only a matter of time before India gained its independence. Finally, in 1946, the cabinet mission was sent to India to transfer the power. The Direct Action Day was launched by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, putting forward his demand for Pakistan. After several meetings, it was finally decided by the Mountbatten Plan that India would be partitioned into two separate dominions, India and Pakistan. The tricolor was unfurled at the Red Fort. On 15th August 1947, Jawaharlal Nehru became the first Prime Minister of India, and finally, on 26th January 1950, India adopted the Constitution and became a sovereign, democratic, and republic nation. Thank you. Now I call upon Ashik to continue.
So just in 2 slides, a very good history has been given by Ananya. Have you seen that movie, Gandhi movie? I think you would have seen that, no? So in that all these things are mentioned very clearly, that Gandhi movie. So even you can watch that now also if you are interested.
Yes,
okay.
Yes,
so now who is continuing, Ananya?
Ashik Kanal will continue, ma'am.
Okay.
Ashik, please mute yourself. Sorry, unmute yourself.
Sorry. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm sorry I didn't unmute my video. Audio. My name is Ashik Kanal. Today I am going to present about the history of India after its independence. The 3 problems India faced after getting independence in 1947 were: number 1, poverty; number 2, unemployment; number 3, ensuring the unity of a country which is full of diversity. The Constitution, adopted in 1950, made India a democratic country. The Constitution was adopted under the chairmanship of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar. India's first Prime Minister, Jawaharlal Nehru, was considered the architect of modern India. Lal Bahadur Shastri, who succeeded Nehru, led India in Indo-Pakistan War of 1965, and as we all know that he gave a popular slogan called Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan during the war. Lal Bahadur Shastri is remembered for his honesty and his simple way of living. After Lal Bahadur Shastri, India got many prime ministers like Srimati Indira Gandhi, and Morarji Desai became the first non-Congress Prime Minister of India. After that, Chaudhary Charan Singh, again Indira Gandhi, again Rajiv Gandhi, and so on. In its 72 years of independence, India has several achievements to its credit. It has built a modern economy, second fastest growing economy, remained a democracy, lifted millions of poverty, and has become a space and nuclear power, and developed a robust foreign policy. I would like to say some important events in independent India. I may not mention all of them because there are many of the incidents. Number 1, annexation of Sikkim. It was done in 1975. Prime Minister of India during that time was Indira Gandhi, and the mastermind for the annexation of Sikkim was Aryan Kao, then the Chief of Research and Analytical Wing. Second, formation of northeastern states like Manipur, Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh, etc. Third, Green Revolution and Operation Fold. It was initiated in late 1960s And we being agriculture student, I think all of know about this. Fourth, Indo-Pakistan War of 1971 and 1999. Both of the war were won by India, and the War of 1971 divided in Pakistan into two parts and gave a birth to a new country called Bangladesh. And the War of 1999 is also known as Kargil Divas, and this was also won by India proudly, and we celebrate it as Kargil Vijay Divas in 26 July. Fifth, Indian emergency of 1975 to 1977. It was also done by then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Sixth, economic reforms in India was initiated in 1991. This was done when the Prime Minister was P.V. Narasimha Rao and the Finance Minister was Manmohan Singh, who later became the Prime Minister of India from 2004 to 2014. Seventh, India conducted nuclear test in Pokhran in May 1998. This was the second nuclear test conducted by India after 1974. This was done when Atal Bihari Vajpayee was Prime Minister of India, and this mission was conducted so secretly because America had put a restriction to conduct any nuclear test in any countries. And eighth, Pratibha Patil became the first woman to be elected President of India in 2007. After that also, India got many good and bad incidents, like India won Cricket World Cup of 2011, and they got a terrorist attack in 2016, 2018. So I'd like to end my topic here. Jai Hind. My friend Avijna will continue from here. Thank you.
Okay, good presentation by you. So you mentioned Pratibha Patil was the first women president of India, no?
Yes, ma'am.
She visited GKVK also. She visited our GKVK for one convocation. 8-9 years back, she had landed in our campus. Okay, so during that time, there was no auditorium. So you have North Block, no? You know North Block, no? You all.
Yes, ma'am.
So in North Block, there is one stage on open ground. So there is a stage, no? Have you noticed that? So their stage was built up for president's visit, okay, during that time. So it was one of the remarkable event in our university. Okay.
Yes,
Okay,
ma'am.
ma'am.
So, okay, who is the next student?
Good evening, ma'am. Good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
My name is Abhijna. I am here to talk about the topic Indian culture. All of you know India is well known for its rich and vibrant culture. Indian culture represents numerous cultures of different religions and communities present in India. India has evolved as an ethnically diverse country. Ethnicity of India makes it unique from other nations. First, we want to know about what is ethnicity. Ethnicity is a social and cultural concepts having similar cultural practices. They share common culture, common norm, practice, customs, and history. Such multiple groups appear as a cultural pocket. In India, there are many ethnic groups. Three major ethnic groups are Indo-Aryan, Dravidian, and Mongoloids. Indo-Aryans are majorly in northern and central parts of the India. Dravidians are South Indians. Mongoloids are the northeastern side, and the Mongoloids are the rich ethnic diversity different from other ethnically. These groups are also subdivided into subgroups, caste, and tribes and religion. The religions that prevalent in the country are Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Sikhism, Buddhism, etc., with the freedom for the citizen to practice any religion they want to. The positive side of the diversity are good for the country, but not managed well, then it will create the problem for our national integrity and development. Like ethnicity, lifestyle of India also exhibits a variety. Indian people staying in different parts of the country vary from each other in terms of clothing, food, habits, religion, festivals, so on. Moreover, Indian people believe a lot in values, customs. Different customs and traditions are followed in different regions. In Indian lifestyle, principles of karma and dharma are given significant value. And most prominent ideologies are Tyag, Nishtha, Ahimsa, Upeksha, Satya, and Dharma. In addition to this, respect also significant in the lives of Indian. Indian regard as the guest as a god and treat them with respect and courtesy. Different religions have different way of greeting elders and guests. Family bonding and kindship is the such one valued tradition in India. In there exists the concept of joint family. And Indians celebrate all special occasions like birth, marriage, harvest season, festivals with the following their own particular tradition. India being multicultural, multi-ethnic and multi-religious society, celebrate holidays, festivals and festivals, etc. And the national holidays in India are the Independence Day, Republic Day and Gandhi Jayanti. And popular religious festivals include Holi, Makar Sankranti, Deepavali, Eid, Christmas. In addition, many Indian states and regions have local festivals also. Indian New Year festivals are celebrated in the different parts of India with unique style in different times. That is Ugadi, Bihu, Gudi Padwa, Vishu, Puttanda are the New Year festivals of different parts of India. Not only the Indian culture, property of the togetherness among people make India has the unique country. Thank you. Next, Govind will talk about art and literature.
Okay, good presentation by you. Slides are very colorful. Who has prepared these slides?
Keen, ma'am.
Yeah.
Keen,
Hmm.
Keen Victor.
So
Keen Victor.
very good. Keen Victor, you have done very good job. You have collected very beautiful pictures.
Thank you, ma'am. Our group mates have also helped
Okay, very good.
a lot.
Very good. Yeah, who is continuing next?
Ma'am, it's Govind. Hello.
Okay, continue.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Govind, and today I'm here to give you an overview on the importance of art and literature of India in promoting social harmony. India is home to several art forms, most of which are directly linked to its culture. Art encompasses various subjects from singing, dancing, painting, to even architectural styles. The more popular art forms of Bharatanatyam, Kathakali, Kathak, Kuchipudi, etc. are renowned worldwide and often elevates Indian culture onto international platforms. Some of the most noted Indian painters include M.F. Hussain, Raja Ravi Verma, Rabindranath Tagore, etc. Indian literature, from the very first novel of Bankim Chattopadhyay's Rajmohan's Wife in 1864 to Arundhati Roy's Booker Prize winner, The God of Small Things in 1997, narrates different parts of Indian culture. The purpose of art and literature in nation building is that it gives an average Indian leverage and reasons to think of, to take pride in, to form a sense of unity and harmony with others, and to come together with fellow Indians to defend, expand India's glory, culture, traditions, and even that of its people. Yet it is sad to say that many of these art forms and authentic techniques are a threat from being forgotten for good. The folk and tribal art forms such as Tanjore art, Madhubani paintings, Tamilta, etc., are nearing extinction due to shift in interest of the natives towards foreign culture. Hence, there's a great need for India and its citizens to work harder to preserve these gems of art and literature, which are unique representations of its land and its people. Because who else best to preserve the Indian culture than us Indians? Thank you. Let me call upon Ankita to carry on with the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Okay, in one slide you would have included whatever paintings you have mentioned.
Okay, ma'am.
Paintings, all that Orissa paintings and all. No, in one slide you can simply mention. Okay, some all different paintings.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay.
Ankita, please mute yourself. Sorry, unmute yourself.
I'm sorry. So good afternoon, ma'am, and good afternoon to all the friends. So I'm Ankita. I'm Ankita Verma. I'm now representing the topic of youth and national integration and the involvement of youth in national integration. Since we know that India at all times has been a multiracial, multilingual, multi-religious society, though national integration in India is that recognition of feeling of oneness. People in the country belong to different castes, with different creed, faith, religion, and regions, and speak different languages. So here, the diversity is recognized in India and respected by imbibing a sense of nationhood. It's a sentiment that makes us feel proud of our heritage and binds all people in one bond. So, for the progress of any nation, unity of thought and mutual brotherhood is very important. And it's the national integration is that tool that can help save the country from falling into the hands of extremism and fanaticism. And yes, youth, they should be given a chance to come together, to join hands, and to make people aware about the importance of national integration. They are that demography in India which has a modern outlook, which are more tech savvy, they are rebellious, they are broad minded, they are open to ideas, the cultures, and other than the culture they grew up in, and more aware of the world affairs and more vocal in the socio-economic issues affecting India right now. So if these qualified, efficient, and dedicated young men can give, if given a chance, can transform any country into a superpower. But this is not at all possible without their being filled with the idea of national integration. So they must be aware that the things of the spirit of unity and harmony, that the spirit of unity and harmony may be sometimes facing graving challenges like forces of separation and fanaticism threaten to destroy the cherished idols of one country and one people. So they need to counter the forces of this conservatism, regionalism, ethnicity, casteism, and communalism that serve as the obstacle in the path of national integration. So now I would like to continue with some of the factors. Now just have a look on the factors which can help us and which can help all of us to mobilize the youth so that they could foster the idea of social harmony and national integration in a better way. So these are some of the factors. And the first factor which you can see that education. So I would like to talk about that. Education is one of the biggest mobilizing factor that today the influx of youth in other disciplines like is ensuring the opening of mindset of them and leading to a change to help people to overcome their differences and come together as one community. We know the Education Commission of India of 1952 and 53 has also emphasized the role of education in the country and its importance in making its contribution to developments of the habits, attitudes, and qualities of character, and to enable it to have worthily bear the responsibility of a democratic citizenship. So I would like to list some of the steps like which could be helped in this direction. We should have an idealized system of education throughout the country of centralized administration, along with imparting of religious and moral education. Along with it, development of all modern Indian languages and also enriching the vocabulary. We should realize the importance of our national anthems, our national prayers, and national pledges, which help us in bonding the young people and developing harmony. Along with it, the inclusion of youth festivals like leadership training programs like of NSS, NCC, etc., to bring their ideas on one stage. Along with it, the domiciliary restrictions should be avoided for the migration of students from one state to another state. In case of higher educational institutions, the exchange of ideas through teachers and the students from one state to another or one institute to another for lectures or seminars can also help us. And the last and the most important thing with which I would like to conclude is the realization of the important role played by the teachers is the most important because they could necessarily be engaged to mold the perception and the pre-existing realities of the students and to enlighten them and to convince them to serve for national integration. With this, I would like to conclude and I would like to hand over to Devendra for the next slide.
So very good presentation by you. And this is a very good topic. And as you said, you would have mentioned a sentence also like the population of our country. So it constitutes around 66% of the youth only. Okay? So youth, as you mentioned, youth are the major building blocks of our nation, and they are having a greater role for this national integration and all. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Continue.
Good afternoon to all of you.
Good afternoon.
My name is Devendra Dansena. In continuation with Ankita, I would like to continue my topic on social media. It is, as we know that WhatsApp, Twitter, Instagram, and all these social media platforms are given very much importance these days. If we look to the positive impact of this, is it a great? As we know that social media are helping students nowadays to continue their education. They are further getting importance so that they can improve their education quality. In India, most of the students nowadays are moving towards the YouTube to find a very resourceful contents. Social media is also very convenient to to get updated about all the news. As we don't have to further depend upon the newspapers to get the information. We when we just we can just can have a click on the cell phone and get all the resourceful news. Also, social media has some of the other disadvantages, as we know that maybe we are using many of our time so that to be in social media. So in order to consider one harmful effects in the society, the oversharing one social media can be dangerous. It can attack our privacy. Also, overusing lead to spending too much time on social media, which can deviate children from their studies. Sometimes fake news is also spread with the help of disturbing the people. In short, social media has advantages and disadvantages. It is up to us how we use it. So use it wisely. In further continuation of my next topic, that is job, I would like to continue. That is, a job, employment, work, and occupation is a person's roles in a society. Specifically, a job is an activity often regular or performed in exchange of payment. In our country, ASI and NSSO. ASI, Annual Survey of Industry, and NSSO, National Survey Office, according to which 43.3 crore, that is 94%, are organized are belonging to unorganized sector, and the remaining 2.6 crore, that is 6%, are belonging to the organized sector in this recent year. As this is due to the fact that nation has faced many downs and great falls in the recent year. In also in this corona pandemic situation, the economic crisis has risen to a heights. But this situation, government should build proper skill centers to provide proper training. Also, the private sector to set up a proper training centers that would be helping and helping human resources to proper ignite mode and take up any challenges. Nowadays, big tech giants and many MNCs are employing students not on the basis of their education qualification, rather on their skills and the extra quality which they possess. At last, I would like to say that that don't run into the marks. Just read and gain some fruitful knowledges and also skills, so that it would help you to increase your capacity in your future and also help you in the present work. Thank you.
Yeah, very good presentation. Yes, as you told, skills are very important. So that's why there is Skill Development Corporation of India also. And in our university, there is SDC, that is Skill Development Center. It is mainly to enhance the skill of younger population, like young students, youth, so all those things. So that SDC is there. So we have conducted already so many programs. So now also we will conduct under SDC with respect to like personality development, keeping the surroundings clean, okay, and food taboos, then importance of health and nutrition and sanitation, importance of fruits and vegetables. So all these are there. So skills are very important, as you said rightly.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Now my friends will continue the next topic.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. So here the question is, where does health come in when we discuss the topic of nation building? Health and fitness play a vital part both in nation building and when it comes to the role that youths play in it. Only a fit, and by fit I mean both mentally, physically, and even socially fit and healthy individual would be able to aid his nation in its development. Moreover, in contrast, a nation's developmental status is primarily dependent on the number of healthy and viable working population, that is majorly the youth of the country. A 2018 study of Indian populations have shown that rather than critical infectious diseases like malaria, AIDS, etc., and non-communicable diseases like diabetes, high cholesterol levels, more often it is the mental and behavioral issues like depression, smoking, illicit drug use, etc., along with undernutrition and obesity that have taken more lives among the youth. You can see the statistics of the youth deaths from various drug uses in the graph shown. It's in the next slide. But the youth of India are also the more ideal choice of the solution for this problem, with more focus being given on physical and mental fitness by several young influencers. The youth of today are again becoming viable candidates of nation building. These self-fit and socially proactive individuals can become ready to actively take part in activities to improve the nation's global status in several fields, such as economic, political, educational, and financial fields. And thus, health and fitness are assets to every individual. And every healthy and fit individual is the asset of the nation. Thank you. And let me invite Akshat to carry on with the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ma'am, and everyone present out here. I'm Akshat, and I'm here to tell you about urbanization. Am I audible?
You're
Yes, yes,
audible. What about others? Do we see this? It's audible for all?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Audio.
Okay.
So, by the definition, it's a population shift from the rural to the urban areas and the ways in which the society adopts to the changes. It predominantly results in the physical growth of urban areas, be it horizontal or vertical. Urbanization is a process during which the industrial structures become increasingly oriented around secondary and the tertiary industries instead of the primary ones. In this sense, urbanization also involves the changes in the working population from the agricultural to the non-rural industrialization and service occupations, as well as in changes in the thinking pattern, lifestyle, behavior, values, and the culture. Now, urbanization in India. Urbanization in India is taking place at a very faster rate. The population residing in urban areas in India, according to 1901 census, was 11.4. This count increased to 28.53% according to 2001 and crossed 30% as per 2011, now standing at 37%. Now let's have a look on some causes of urbanization. The very first cause of urbanization is industrialization. Industrialization has historically led to urbanization by creating economic growth and job opportunities that draw people to the cities. Urbanization typically begins when a factory or multiple factories are established within a region, thus creating a high demand for the factory labor. Other businesses such as the builder manufacturers, the retailers, and the service providers then follows the factories to meet the product demand of the workers, thus creating more jobs and the demand for housing, thus establishing an urban area. The second factor is the social factors. When we talk about the social factors, we put more focus on the assets of having a mature and a more developed society. These factors, which enforces more and more people towards the urban culture, are improved standard of living, some better educational facilities, a well-warmed status among the people in the society, some easy access to the resources and the services, a better and a varied food culture, music concerts, and much more. The third cause of industrialization, the third cause of urbanization is employment opportunities. Some high-paying job openings for the highly skilled and the trained candidates are predominantly available in the urban areas. Most scientists, the business executives, and the engineer workers at the laboratories or the firms in metropolitan areas. Urban centers need service industries workers as well as the knowledge-based professional. So there is usually a large pool of jobs over there. The fourth cause is modernization. We have taken a step towards next generation where the indeed time-consuming works are finished up in seconds. So the very mere touch of technologies can be seen in the areas where it will accelerate the developmental issues and give humans a time of advancement in the communication that would assist in the daily actions to modernization. Thus, it plays a very important role in urbanization. Let's discuss out some factors of urbanization. The first is the overpopulation. As we know about, the crowding has been increasing very rapidly. Its effect is seen severe in the cities. Everyone wants a better health condition, better environment to live in, and a better life. To large number of people working there, way in the cities, so causing it overcrowding, accommodation problems, growth of slums, and much more. The second effect is disintegration of the joint families. We come across this sometimes in the cities, as we know, as we have discussed about the accommodation problem, and thus further by emphasizing the individuality and primary urbanization, encourage the urbanites for small families. The third is high cost of living. The better opportunities, infrastructures comes with greater expenses, and this has led to an increased cost of living in the cities. So it's a bit challenging to sustain a decent standard of living for those people with lower income groups. The fourth problem is the pollution. The next slide. With uncontrolled urbanization in India, environmental degradation has been occurring very rapidly and causing many problems like the land insecurities, worsening the water qualities, excessive air pollution, noise, and the problems of waste disposal. By this, I conclude my topic, and I invite my friend Anagar to continue with youth and empowerment. Thank you.
Akshat, you gave very good presentation. Have you
Yes,
incorporated the effect of urbanization on the selection of foods also? Processed foods like pizza, burgers and all, wherever you go, all class of people, they are opting for all these processed foods, because of adoption of processed foods in their diet. You can see that there is like increased surgence of diabetes mellitus and all in younger generation also, younger population, youth. Okay. So
yes,
because of this, India has become capital for diabetes. Even because of urbanization, because of increased intake of processed food, this is one of the consequence what we are facing now. So
yes,
that's why, however, maybe urbanization is impacting us, we have to follow the tradition also. Okay, means just I am adding that like millets
yes,
have become this one now. New crop, but it is not a new thing. Okay, millets were used by our forefathers. Okay, so they were using it. Now it has come. Though we are in urbanization phase, again millets have come on our plate. Why? Mainly to reduce all these food related diseases. Okay, so this just I wanted to add this. Okay. So inclusion of processed foods, beverages, and inclusion of refined foods. Okay, so it is causing nutrition related problems for younger population. So this I wanted to add.
yes,
So you have to judiciously choose foods. Okay.
yes,
Okay. Though you are urbanized, so even the food selection is very important. Okay.
yes.
So that little bit of information you can add, okay, before submission.
Sure, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Who is next presenter?
Hello, is this audible?
No, not
Audible,
audible.
but it's little bit not clear.
Now it's audible.
Yes, it's audible.
Okay. Good afternoon to everyone. Today I'm going to perform the presentation and I named the topic known as Youth as Hope of Nation. Youth is the structural and functional framework of the nation. Every nation's pillar of success is its younger generation and its achievements. A beautiful saying of Nelson Mandela that youth of today are the leaders of tomorrow is true and applicable in each and every aspect. Youth lays the foundation
of development for any of the nations. Youth is the abilities and potential of learning along with performing. Every individual as a child
What happened? Yeah, now, yeah, you can continue now.
Hello.
Yeah,
Ma'am,
continue.
this internet. Every
Yeah, you can
individual as a child dreams of becoming something in their lives. In other words, we can say that they have some objective. The child completes up the education and obtains some skills to achieve something. Therefore, it is the positive attitude of that individual towards the progress of the nation. Youth have a quick learning, creativity, skills. They have the power to bring up transformation in our society. Youth is set up with that spark which can make anything happen. There are many negative beliefs and acts carried on in our society. Youth has the capability of changing the same and bringing up the concept of gender and social equality. The youth of today is going to shape, therefore, the power and potential must be fully utilized by providing them with sufficient opportunities. And one of the most important factors is empowering youth, as there are various challenges faced by them. Next slide, please. Youth empowerment. Youth empowerment is a process where children and young people are encouraged to take charge of their lives. Youth empowerment aims to improve the quality of life, and it is achieved through the participation of youth empowerment programs that may be non-profit organizations or government organizations, schools or private organizations. India is a country which is training in youth with 70% of people below the age of 40 years. In fact, youth today is the major resource for not only the development, but also the financial prosperity, but for social changes as well. The need to empower youth for a better tomorrow is connected both to the financial elevation as well as the increment in the standard of living. And youth empowerment is that any development that is imperative not only for the national development, but also for the personal development of an individual. Empowerment is necessarily a process of inculcating values to equip the learner to lead a life that is satisfying to the individual while being in accordance with the cherished values and ideas of the country. There are a few reasons why youth empowerment is essential. First one is poverty eradication. That youth empowerment can help to reduce the poverty to a significant level. Good education standard, that is, empowerment can help the youth to understand the importance of education that leads to the social improvement of the country. Good governance, where with the inculcation of youth empowerment, the youth can reject the status quo and pave a path for the better future. Crime reduction, where empowerment ensures the youth has the necessary skill to sustain a livelihood, preventing him to adopt the path of crime. Youth contribution to the nation's growth and development that is not fully appreciated or maximized. But in a number of areas, our country's youth are making a difference as politicians, as advocates. They are the most valuable tools for bringing about the positive changes in society because they are encouraged or empowered citizens. They have the ability to play a key role in the nation's growth and development. Thank you. And I call upon Ayaz to continue the presentation.
Okay, Anaghano, your name?
Yes, ma'am.
So whatever you have presented, your topic is very, very important. Okay. So after your graduation or after attaining skills, empowerment is the result what It's very important for, it's having a greater role in the development of nation. So very good compiled information you have given, Anagha. So now youth and conflict is the next topic, is it?
Thank you, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Ayaz Shajal, and today I'll be discussing with you the topic of conflict resolution. So before we go into conflict resolution, first let us understand what are the conflicts that we are facing today and why conflict resolution is so much important for a country. To begin with, we have transnational terrorism. In India, there have always been an increasing concern about transnational terrorism. And it is no surprise that most of the transnational terrorism in India relates to its conflicts with Pakistan over Jammu and Kashmir. In fact, it is disappointing that even after 73 years since independence, the India-Pakistan conflicts are yet to find an amicable resolution. Now, adding to these are the recent conflicts that have arisen between India and China in the border, which provoked military tensions from both the sides. And ultimately, it led to the death of 20 Indian soldiers. Well, transnational terrorism could be very devastating to any country if failed to resolve at the initial stages. Because what history tells is that these conflicts often escalate so rapidly that most often it ends in wars. And this is what has happened between Israel and Palestine recently. And what is even more painful is that most often it is those innocent people, including children, who fall victims of these deadly wars. Now, coming to the next category of conflicts is the electoral and political conflicts. Well, violence have always been a regular feature of Indian elections and local politics. During the campaigns, on polling days, and on the days in which the election results are announced, there have been incidents of clashes between the supporters of political parties. And the recent incidents in West Bengal just substantiate this. We know that India is a democratic country where the citizens have the right to question every actions of the government. And this has led to a series of conflicts arising between the people and the state government and the people and the central government since independence. But what we have seen is that a failure in resolving these issues by the governments in the beginning itself, rather than provoking the people to take violent means, have often led to a complete disruption of law and order in the country. And just to mention here, the farmers' protest, which began in November last year, even after 11 rounds of talk between the farmers and the government of India, the problems of the farmers are yet to be resolved. Now, coming to the third category, it is a communal violence. Given India's religious and ethnic diversity, there is a huge concern over communal and religious intolerance. In fact, among all the conflicts that we have seen so far, communal violence is the most devastating conflict a country could ever face. Why? Because these conflicts often tend to divide the country from within. And today's world, especially in India, what we find is that religious sentiments often tend to take an upper hand over humanity, because there is no other explanation one can give for killing each other on communal basis. So coming to the last part of my presentation, which is why conflict resolution is so much important. Let it be transnational terrorism, electoral or political violence, or communal conflicts. Ultimately, what all of these does is that it just diverts the country from addressing the real problems of the people in that country. Take, for example, India. Around 86 million people are still living in extreme poverty. 14% of the population is undernourished. And the second wave of the COVID-19 has just revealed the collapsing healthcare and infrastructure. We have much bigger and real problems out there to be tackled. And these conflicts could just literally slow down the pace of development of any country. And there arises the importance of resolving or finding a solution to these conflicts. So that's it. Thank you so much for bearing for the last few minutes. Now my friend Ahadil will brief you about the strategies of conflict resolution adopted. Thank you.
Good presentation by you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Ahadil Nias. I'm talking about strategies of conflict resolution. There are 5 strategies of conflict resolution. First one is avoiding. Someone who uses a strategies of avoiding mostly tries to ignore or sidestep the conflict, hoping it will resolve itself or dissipate. And second one, accommodating. Using the strategies of accommodating to resolve conflict essentially involve taking steps to satisfy the other party's concern or demands at the expense of your own needs or desires. And third one is compromising. The strategies of compromising involves finding an acceptable resolution that will partly, but not entirely, satisfy the concern of all parties involved. And fourth one is competing. Someone who uses the conflict resolution strategies of competing try to satisfy their own desires at the expense of other parties involved. And fifth one is collaborating. Using collaborating involves finding a solution that entirely satisfies the concern of all involved parties. Thank you.
Good afternoon, ma'am, and good afternoon to all. My topic is importance of global peace. Am I audible?
Yes, bro, audible.
Yes, you are audible.
Global peace can be referred to as the state of people from all countries being happy and living harmoniously with each other. World peace creates one international community which increases globalization. Globalization is where people from different countries being able to interact freely with each other in various aspects. World peace also contributes to culture exchange. People are able to interact freely with each other and they can learn different cultures from other people. World peace also contributes to more developed economics. This is because people are able to carry out both domestic and foreign investment without fear and the risk of future violence. Global peace also contributes to reduction of wars. Warring country or international conflicts can be reduced if world peace exists. War is the main cause of human suffering in the world. With world peace, you are also assured of increased freedom of people. People get more freedom whether they are from different religion, race, or country. This promotes global cohesion. Conclusion of the global peace. Global peace is very important in the growth and prosperity of the entire global community. This is because with world peace, we are able to have more social cohesion and interaction that are beneficial to everyone. And I would to like invite Indranil Reddy to continue. Thank you. And then
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Indranil Reddy, and today I'm going to talk about role of youth in peace building. Peace building acts as a key to strengthen democratic governance and solve problems at the local, national, and international levels. Youth will be part of future local development and assure important role in resolution conflicts within their communities. India, being one of the youngest nations in the world, and about 65% of population under 35 years of age, this age group of 15 to 29 years comprise 27.5% of population, which makes us about 380 million. Even under tremendous challenges, youth are actively engaging in their communities and are making positive contributions to the peace. Unfortunately, they are facing numerous barriers to participating in formal and informal peace processes. Greater economic opportunities for youth are necessary to motivate young people to pursue peaceful and productive paths. Youth are keen to increase their opportunities in skills to develop entrepreneurial capacities, but these need to be made available for them. Proportionately, there are more young people in many parts of the world, so they must have an active role in peace building. It is ironic while number of young people is overwhelming and their contribution to more peaceful studies mostly ignored. Thank you.
Okay, who is continuing further?
Ma'am, Ayaz will take up the conclusion part.
Okay.
Once again, good evening. Uh, well, I know it's been quite a lot for today, but at the end of the day, one should ask yourself, what did I learn from this? Probably the most important question. So I'll just try to consolidate it for you. Well, if you look at the topics that we have discussed today, it may look a little bit disconnected. For instance, we started with the Indian history. Well, one might ask, is it really necessary to learn our history? Because it is a past. Should we be wasting our time discussing the past? Well, the answer is a big yes then, because our history forms the foundation on which our country is being built. And you cannot build a future without understanding what forms the basis of our country. Then our culture and traditions. Remember, India is not a home for just one community or a group. In fact, it is a compilation of many. And if the people of our country had recognized this and respected each other, I tell you what, there wouldn't have been any communal violences in our country. Well, maintaining communal harmony and respecting pluralism in a country as diverse as India can be a huge challenge. But we should also remember that unity in diversity is one of the hallmarks of India. And it is high time that we show some justice so that it does not confine itself to a mere tagline of our country. Moreover, a nation which is built by the contribution of communities working together can contribute significantly not only to the nation building process, but also helps in attaining global peace and harmony. Remember, India is one of the oldest countries and at the same time, a very young nation. And as a youth of the nation, it becomes our moral responsibility to be at the forefront to search for the development of our country and to break the stereotypes and prejudices in our society. And in the end, I honestly urge each one of you, rather than seeing it through the eyes of someone else, look into your society and the world around you. See yourself what is happening and think yourself and have a very strong stand and rational opinions of your own. And ultimately, remember, don't look for factors which divide us, but look for those which unite us. And that is ultimately humanity. So that's it. Once again, on behalf of the entire group, I thank each one of you for your patience and listening to our presentation. And a very special thanks to our teacher, Shamshad Begum ma'am, for giving us an opportunity like this to put forth our views on these various topics. So once again, thank you so much.
So very good conclusion by the group member. So the whole group have put very good efforts, okay, with respect to social harmony and national integration. So it is the picture what they have bought in the form of PPT. So all students, you can just go through the slides. I told some modifications, no? Keen Victor, you can include that and you can post it in the group and everybody will go through that. Okay.
Sure, ma'am.
So very good efforts by group 5. So you mentioned group 5 in your slide number 1 and you include NSS emblem. You know the emblem, no?
Yes, ma'am.
So I have put in the group thing. One student had put. So you can take that emblem and you have to put NSS emblem, UAS emblem and group 5. And in the second slide, all your names are there. I just took the screenshot of that. So a very good presentation. I congratulate all the group members.
Thank you, ma'am.
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 Yeah, welcome.
Thank you,
So
ma'am.
Gavi Siddesh, so now
Ma'am.
group 3 and 4 are remaining, no?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So you will communicate
Next
to me.
week, next week they will do, ma'am. Group 3 are ready, ma'am, for next week.
Okay. They are ready. Okay, fine.
Yes, ma'am.
Even today also
Thank
you
you.
would have finished. Anyhow, since this is still going on, you can do in the next week. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. Welcome.